Joining the show tonight, he's the national columnist for D2Football.com, a Bloomsburg alum, and a man who's pumped for this game on Saturday. He's been covering it for a long time. Chuck Bitner joining us tonight. What's going on, man?
Toby, so much going on this week, but I'm really glad to be here to talk some D2 football with you.
I'm pumped to have you. And before we get into any of it, can we talk a little bit about the immaculate setup you've got going on behind you? A dude who is pretty, look at all these different squads you're repping behind you.
They're all D2, every one of them.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of different conferences, a lot of different teams represented, and the decals are all D2 helmet decals as well. So, yeah, I'd like to say it's all just by accident, but yeah, it's a very carefully cultivated background that we have here. Thankfully, the work colleagues and the people I work with professionally, they get to see the same thing. So it works for all occasions.
That's funny. How do you get your hands on all those? They're all customs or what? You just get a decal and you're putting them on?
Some of those are custom. Some of those I did myself through a very rudimentary cutting out a car decal and sticking on a helmet. And there are a few schools that will manufacture their own and sell them at bookstores. So there's also a few customizers you can find out there on eBay. So occasionally I'll throw a few bucks at somebody to customize one. But there's actually a few others that aren't even up there on the wall yet. So it makes for a fun collectible for sure.
I love it, man. I love it. It's unique, it's character, and I think it's all about what we're doing here at this level. But let's talk before we get into the big game. Talk about the semifinal matchups a little bit before moving on to this weekend. Both these teams winning, they did it decisively, albeit in very different ways. I think you could probably argue, instead of talking about what we already know about both these squads, what's something they put on tape Saturday that maybe is different from what we've seen in weeks 1 through 14, 15 from these guys.
Well, I think with Harding, you kind of know who they are and what they do, right? Their identity is pretty well known. It's a very physical and fast defense, and offensively, their system is what it is. That flex bone it's a bit of a throwback, but there's a lot of modern elements to that as well. And I think the interesting thing about the results from last weekend is that really the way those two games played out is kind of the opposite of what I expected them to be. I thought Lenore-Rhyne would have a little bit more for Harding. I thought that would be a close game for probably at least 3/4 or so. And I really thought Mines would just run away from Kutztown. I really did. And Kutztown really made them work for it. I don't think at any point Kutztown was really a threat to win that game, and I didn't expect them to be, but they made Mines really work for that. And I do think that Kutztown showed, if you really can commit to getting some pressure on John Matocha, that's what it's going to take to beat them. Now, they couldn't do it consistently enough, but there were a lot of plays where they were able to get off the field by having some success on first and second down, getting pressure on Matocha, playing tough against the run. So I think that there was enough that you could really see out of that, Kobe, and really also going back to the Central Washington game as well, that there's a path to beating Mines.
Absolutely.
If you can really be physical on defense. So I think it makes the matchup this coming week really exciting.
Yeah, and they did something that a lot of teams aren't able to do. I heard you talk about it on your guys' show on Sunday, which was limiting McLeod on the outside. And I think there are two takeaways from that. One is that he does have an Achilles heel between him and Matocha, that connection we've seen all year. It's not an automatic 150 burger every single time they step out on the turf. The other piece that, from a mind standpoint could be really encouraging is that even when he's not having a day, you've got dudes across the field that are going to step up and have this just crazy production. I don't want to say out of nowhere because these dudes have been contributing, but a guy like Sheila comes out and has this probably the best game of his career. So as an Ordigger fan, it feels really nice to know that maybe as a backup plan, even if it is, there's some depth out there and there's other guys that can step up and be just as beneficial for them offensively.
Well, that's what makes them so dangerous, right? There's just so many different ways that they can burn you. And, Max McLeod's been one of the best and most productive wide receivers in D2 all season. But Kutztown really kind of had a blueprint going back to their two matchups with Slippery Rock. They were very committed to not letting Kyle Sheets, who's Slippery Rock's, NFL prospect receiver. They were very committed to not letting him burn them and be a big factor in the game. Now, if you're going to do that as a defense, you can be successful at that, but that's going to open up some opportunities somewhere else on the field. And of course, Mines was really able to find out where else is Kutztown going to be vulnerable, and they were able to get a lot of matchups with Sheely that were very favorable. And the thing is, Kobe, the way these guys have played together for so long, that kind of communication that they have with each other, where even if Sheely's covered, the way you're going to intentionally underthrow the ball or back shoulder that and put it in a spot where he expects it to be, but you get the defender out of position. They were just so successful at doing that.
That's the rapport that, a lot of guys don't get to have, especially in this day and age where it's not, oh, you come in with your boys year one and now we're all fifth years graduating together. Hell, like that does not happen. Like that just does not happen as much anymore. Credit to Mines. They've done a great job of cultivating, getting the guys that they want. It fits not only their scheme offensively, but just their culture as a squad over there. And obviously being in the demographic that they are as a school, like there is a very limited pool of guys that really can come in and buy into that kind of program. But credit to them. They've done a great job of the dudes that can play ball and are going to get a great degree from that kind of quality of school. It feels like they've swallowed all of them up.
Well, and it's a little bit of a throwback or an old school way of doing it, that building your team through culture and consistency. And obviously Harding really does the same thing. But,
Yeah.
In today's college football, we focus so much on accumulating talent, and it's the rapidity that teams can go build through transfers and things like that. It's really changed the way we construct college football rosters. But with Mines, it's very much the old way of doing it, getting high school recruits, getting them in there. They stay for, gosh, at this point now, some have been there for 6 years through the COVID era. That's kind of an older way of doing it. And boy, look at the results there. And really, you could say the same thing for Harding, because that's a culture where they bring in high school athletes and bring them up through their system for years. And now you get to this point where both teams are 14-0.
It's fun to see. And it almost like watching these guys, it's almost like you get invested in watching these guys. So you see the passion they play with. I love the post-game videos in the locker room, and they got it's like the engineer swag surf going on in Club Dub back there, which is pretty cool. But I'm going to ask you this about both the squads, but for Mines first, if there's one game for Harding that in some type of hypothetical world, they've got to sit down, they only get to watch film from this game, what is it on Mines' timeline and their campaign this year, and what takeaways, why?
Well, I think if you were the Harding staff and you only got to watch tape on one Mines game this year, you're certainly not going to look at any of their RMAC games, because they won their RMAC schedule by an average of 56-9. So you're not going to look at any of those. And certainly, here's the thing to consider is that even though the GAC plays a closed schedule, so there's no out of conference games, these two teams do have a common opponent, and that's Grand Valley State. So if you're Harding, how you matched up with Grand Valley State.
Yep.
So that's a really good barometer. Now, they played back in Mines in week one. So that's almost a whole season ago at this point, but it's still the same team, still the same roster, a lot of the same philosophies. So you're certainly going to go back and look at that game and see how did we match up in certain areas against Grand Valley? How did Mines match up against them? And that's a really good barometer for you to look at. Also, it's the team that came the closest to beating them. So you want to kind of see how did they do that? They also did something that no one else has been able to do, which is erase a fourth quarter deficit. Mines had a 2-score lead in that game back in week one. Grand Valley actually came back and scored 2 fourth quarter touchdowns, which is something that nobody's really able to do against Mines, is really punch back that late in the game. So there's a lot of takeaways that you would want to examine from that game.
I remember sitting down watching that one week one, and we were spoiled because that was one of the better ones this season. And, they go up and get that onside kick, and you're like, wait, no, like that's not supposed to, like this team is, that's not supposed to happen, but they did it, and they did it again, and they really clawed their way back into that one. Now, this Mines team, you talk about the runners-up last year, it feels like this squad, they've improved in multiple areas, obviously, but the front seven defensively for them, their physicality in the line of scrimmage, to me as an outsider, feels somewhere that they've very much improved. A lot of the talk in the offseason was how they maybe didn't match up as well against a very physical GLIAC opponent in Ferris State. Obviously, the first instance of proving the people wrong was in week one against the dominant GLIAC foe in Grand Valley. Talk about that defense and how they've really answered and I guess stepped up to the call this year, and if that bodes well for them, I would assume so, against a Harding squad that's very run heavy.
Yeah, I think that's sort of an interesting element to this game on both sides of it, is how good the defenses are. Because, we know historically offense is what gets headlines. Defense wins games, defense wins championships, but offense will always win the headlines, right? It's just always more fun to show highlights of offensive plays, talk about it, socialize it. And obviously both bring a lot to the table offensively. But I think this game is probably about the defenses. And neither team is where they are without some extremely good defensive play. Harding doesn't beat Grand Valley without an elite defense. Mines does not get to 14-0 without an elite defense. And really no one has had a lot of success against that Mines defense, including some teams that are pretty darn good offensively, going back to teams like Angelo State, They made Augustana look completely incompetent. That's a very
Yes.
good NSIC champ that they completely humbled. Western Colorado had absolutely nothing for them. Pueblo had nothing for them. Those are teams that bring a lot to the table, and Mines really kind of made them look silly, and it's because of the physicality that they play with on defense. And I think that the thing that bodes well for them is if you kind of look at that Grand Valley game, again, both teams are going to look at that and kind of figure out how they matched up against Grand Valley and see how that extrapolates to matching up with each other. Mines is going to look at how Grand Valley was able to really shut down Harding's offense, or at least kind of really limit them for most of
Absolutely.
that game.
Albeit, like, other than the one drive, right, that they got back into the Harding that we've seen, which is probably the only worrying thing for Mines and their offense, is the fact that they might not be seeing a lot of the grass on Saturday if everything goes Harding's way. They keep them on the sideline. But the running back position also feels like a spot where they've, again, not that they were bad before, but certainly added depth, getting to the transfer portal, which is a little bit outside of their typical way of acquiring that talent. Talk about that room. I feel like between Roper, Walker, those kind of guys, they've added another really dangerous element to this offense.
Well, and that was really the biggest question mark that I had about Mines coming into the season, because they lost one of the best players in school history, Mike Zeman, graduated last year, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
just the productivity but the leadership that he brought to that offense. I thought that was going to be a really big loss for them to overcome. And certainly just with the senior leadership that's already there, they had that aspect of it covered. And then, they kind of had to go to a couple different players to backfill the productivity that Seaman had, but they've been able to do it very successfully. And it's worked really well for me. Roper's a very good inside runner, but he can do a lot of
Hell
things.
yeah.
And yeah, it was a little bit different for them to bring in somebody from from a transfer route. But boy, he certainly has added a lot to that unit.
I love it. I love it. And we're talking run game. Let's talk about that flex bone, the triple option that has been, partially myself to blame, has been all the talk on this Bison squad. But hey, sometimes it's fun, it's exciting, it's different from, at least on the national scene, where we see a lot of the same style of offense. But once again, the defense not feeling, at least from my end, not getting the credit they deserve. When you talk about offenses like Grand Valley State, Central Missouri, the gauntlet that is Super Region 3 coming out of that region, this defense has stepped up and they are suffocating in the box. I think they do a great job of generating pressure. They've been able to keep a lot of quarterbacks off schedule. Again, going through guys like Peterson, Zabrowski, who we've seen put up ridiculous numbers this year, and a lot of bend but not break out of this Bison D.
Harding's playoff run is really impressive when you
Yes.
look at the teams that they've had to play. So it's 3 conference champions and 3 teams that had exceptional records, a lot of success, and really good offensive weaponry to bring to the table. So 3 conference champions, 3 very different types of opponents, and 3 very different games that they
Yes.
played. And they found ways to win all 3 of those. So I think it's very impressive what they've been able to do. I mean, the way they shut down Lenore-Ryan, I did not expect that.
Nope.
LR is a very diverse offense. There's a lot of different things that they can point to, throwing the ball, running the ball, and Harding just had the answers for all of it.
Yeah.
Grand Valley was a little bit limited because they had some injuries there, but that was also just a tremendous job of Harding collapsing the pocket, containing the quarterback, and getting pressure. I actually just rewatched a good bit of that game this morning, and the real difference that the Harding defense made in Grand Valley, beating Grand Valley, was the pressure that they were able to get on the quarterback. Even the plays when they didn't quite get to him, they contained the pocket, they collapsed him, and they hurried the rush, or they hurried the throw a little bit. And that's going to be the key for them with Matoka. Like, nobody's really had a lot of success containing him to the pocket, keeping him from getting outside. And boy, once he gets outside, Kobe, he just improvises. If he buys time, somebody's going to get open. But this might be the defense from the Harding Bisons that can keep him from doing that, keep him contained in the pocket. And if you get some sacks and put them in negative yardage plays, put them behind the sticks, that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And looking at that Lenore-Ryan squad, and when I remember they matched up against Valdosta State, who have bounced back after a 1-year hiatus from the dance and come back and with this Sammy Edwards driven offense, and the conditions for that game obviously played a huge factor. Lenore-Ryan, the more multidimensional of the two offenses, with a guy like McGee coming out of the backfield in that offensive line unit, that was not the case on Saturday at all. Harding made this team one-dimensional, and that, White back there, he looked uncharacteristically off schedule and maybe making some errant decisions, which was interesting. But looking at Saturday, If you were a betting man, just again in a hypothetical, what's the over-under on how many times Keelan Cole, the ball leaves his hand in the air?
3.
3. Okay. And would
We'll go
you,
with
again,
3.
living in this hypothetical, are you hitting the over or the under on that?
In a game like this, you have to figure you're going to pull out every trick that you
Yes.
have at some point. So I would actually bet the over
Okay.
on that.
Hammer it. Hammer it. I love it. That's good, man. I'm excited to see, because obviously we've gotten a little taste of it throughout the playoffs. A big one last week against the North Ryan, and they certainly pulled out all the stops. Special teams has obviously been huge for them thus far as well. But a kind of back to get on that topic of the flex bone, that kind of offense. Is it something now that we see maybe more of in Division II? And I bring that up because you guys discussed it too, the letter from the Tusculum coach about the private schools, maybe with a little bit of lack of funding and a lot of very valid reasons inside of that. Could this offense and this kind of schematically level the playing field for some of these maybe smaller private schools that don't have, unlike Harding, don't have the same level of funding as these larger public institutions, to give these defenses a different, unique look, and maybe doesn't rely on quarterbacks like John Matoka and Zach Zabrowski to get the job done?
I think there's a lot of schools in the lower divisions, Division II, D3, NAIA. I think there's a lot of schools that should take a really close look at it. Especially if you're a school that's just under talented, if you don't have the size, the strength to really compete at the offensive line. One of the ways that you can combat that is through this type of offense. Now, it requires a lot of precision. It requires a lot of study. Requires a lot of discipline. So it's not like it's easy to run,
Absolutely.
but it is different to run. And it can overcome some mismatch deficiencies. It's one of the reasons a lot of high schools still run it. So it's interesting that we've seen the migration away from this offense. And by the way, I thought we would never see an option-based offense play for national championship ever again. I didn't think we'd ever see that. So I think it's pretty darned exciting that we are seeing that. How wild is it that in 2023, a team that is dead last in passing yards is going to play for the national championship?
Hell yeah.
Harding is, obviously they lead the nation in rushing yards by like 110 per game, but they are dead last in passing yards.
I love it.
I didn't think we'd ever see a team like that play for national championship again. So I love it. I think it's very exciting. And to your point, I think there's a lot of teams that probably should consider this type of approach to help them maybe get on track. You do something a little bit different. Things are cyclical. So maybe this is something that we'll start to see come back in vogue. Who knows?
Everything comes back. Everything's trendy again. It's like all the Gen Zers that bring out the old clothes. Same deal, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we've seen a lot of constants with this Bison squad this year. I think maybe the most potent of them is, if you can't stop the dive, you better stay the hell on the bus, because there is no point in coming out into the field. That's where it obviously starts and even sometimes ends with some of these teams. Can Mines do that? That's probably the best question.
Yeah, that the fullback dive, through those gaps right in those tight gaps in the center, kind of really going right behind the center between the guards. That's where they are so dangerous, because I remember, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, watching teams like Oklahoma and Nebraska and Colorado that ran option offenses. A lot of it was, the quarterback getting outside and then doing the last second pitch. And you're going to see a little bit of that from Harding, but it's really more just the physical running between the tackles that they are so dangerous at, and they wear you down. They just wear you down. And then that's, they're just going to hit you with body blows with Dela Cruz and Keelan in the middle.
Studs.
And then, when you're just beaten up and you're gassed from that, then they're going to get you outside with Spicer. And that's when they're going to hit a home run.
Mm-hmm.
So they are extremely dangerous. But, I do think that Harding was a little worried about Grand Valley's speed at the perimeter and their ability to get lateral very, very fast. And I think that's why you saw them so committed to running in the middle with Dela Cruz. And they actually really stayed with that against Lenore Ryan. I don't think that they had some of the same concerns with the speed on the perimeter, but I think that they thought that they could overwhelm Lenore Ryan in the middle of the line, and they were able to do that. So to look at this matchup, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what their approach is, because I don't know that Mines quite has the same level of talent that Grand Valley has. but they do have a lot of the same assets. You know, they
Yeah.
are physical, they do get to the ball quickly, and they tackle well in open space. And that's how Grand Valley was able to be so successful. So I think it will be interesting to see what kind of approach they really kind of go with in this game. And, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, you're gonna know really early. You
Yeah,
know, if their
absolutely.
offense can work, you're going to know really early. And if it doesn't work, then it's going to be very interesting to see how does Harding adjust if they're not having a lot of success.
If at
early.
all, right? Or is
Yeah.
it screw you, we've made it this far. I'll be damned if we switch anything now on the national stage. But we talked a lot about that too with our guy Abe Swanson over there being a big part of that, a dude that maybe isn't the largest statured human on the field, but damn it, from sideline to sideline, the dude is making plays all over the place. And some really good athletes. A lot of guys have been able to do that, but I won't keep you much longer. You guys got a pregame show on Saturday. Tell the people what they can expect from you in the game ahead of the kickoff.
Well, we think we have a plan. We think we know what's gonna happen.
That's usually how it goes.
We've done this for the last 2 years, so we'll have a couple guys on site in McKinney. We will be broadcasting live from the press area. Probably have a few pre-recorded things in the can as well that we'll air. We'll have some guests live there on site.
Awesome.
And it'll be a lot of fun. We've been able to do this for the last 2 years and really kind of bring the feel of the stadium right before kickoff to the fans. It's something that we don't get to see. You guys did an incredible job at lacrosse, you know, a couple of weeks ago, kind of bringing people right to the event and showing them this is what it's like leading right up to kickoff. And that's what we're going to try to do for the championship game. We'll have some interviews. We'll do our picks. We'll do, you know, kind of let people see the lay of the land of the stadium and take them right up to kickoff. And it should be a great day. Obviously, you know, this weekend coming up, we've got, you know, the D3 championship. I'm excited about that too, to see that back in Salem. NAIA has their championship coming up as well.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a huge weekend for small college football fans for sure.
I'm pumped. Talk about the couple guests live. Is Blaster going to be one of those guests?
I don't know that the NCAA permits live mascots for championship events. So
I don't think they do.
I don't think they do, but
damn it, that would be electric.
It'd be a great interview, don't you think? I
gosh.
think we've got a few things lined up. There's a few people that are generally there. I think we typically try to get some advice from Mel Churchma. He was the longstanding coach at Northwest Missouri State. He's usually there. He's just got so much wisdom to share with us about what championship game day is like.
Awesome.
I think Michael Zeman, who I talked about earlier, I think he's planning to be there. We're hoping to grab some time with him and anybody else we can grab a hold of that'll bring some fun insights to the conversation. We'll be happy to bring them on.
Good stuff. Best of luck to you guys. I'll be tuning in, and a lot of people will. But I appreciate your time once again. Thank you for coming on, spitting some knowledge. Have a good rest of your day, man.
My pleasure, Kobe. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'll see you.